for October 4th, 2019. Welcome to Egret Isle Farm and the Serene Disciple Project. We're here in the kitchen today, one of my favorite places. Now, last time I was in the kitchen, I made a bread and I talked about radical hospitality. Today, I want to talk about the spirituality of flour. Wonderful stuff. Now, this week, my wife Kay has been a little bit under the weather. And so last night, I was able to offer her a wonderful warm bowl of fish chowder because, you know, nothing says love like fish chowder, am I right? But today, I want to up my medicinal game a little bit. And when she walks through that door here in some hours, I want her to be greeted by the smell and then the bowl of wonderfully medicinal chicken noodle soup. Now, if chicken noodle soup doesn't cure you, well, we'll try something else. And I'm back to flour because I am going to make the noodles for chicken noodle soup. And I'd like you to come along with me. Shall we? All right, starting out with a pile of flour on the countertop. No mixing bowls nor spoons with this, just flour on the countertop. Making pasta is about as visceral and basic as working with flour gets. And I'm gonna hollow out a depression, crater in the middle, and I'm going to pour in 4 eggs. Isn't that pretty? And that is the whole ingredient list. Pasta at its heart, though it can be made more complicated, pasta at its heart is just eggs and flour. And now comes the really fun part, the need to knead. Now, this first part is truly magical, squishing the eggs between your fingers, and you start to incorporate the liquid into the dry flour. But soon the fun gives way to despair. It just does not seem like there's any way that the eggs can possibly take care of all this flour. It's just too crumbly. But with enough time and enough kneading, it finally does come together into a cohesive ball of very stiff dough. Okay, it is now time to let this rest and mature. Now, I told you that we started with bread flour. And that's because what makes bread flour is the higher gluten content. Now, I know that these days gluten seems like a dirty word, and for some people, gluten causes an autoimmune response that can be very damaging, called a celiac disorder or celiac disease. But what gluten really is a protein that bends and folds in certain ways that allows it to weave together. And it's gluten that causes the magic, the elasticity that allows bread to rise while holding its shape, that allows pastry dough to be compressed into many, many very thin layers like in croissants or a puff pastry. And gluten is what gives pasta the plasticity to be formed into all of the shapes that it can be formed into. But for our purposes today, we need now to wrap this in a damp towel so that it doesn't dry out and let it rest. Just about enough time for a cup of coffee on the porch, about half an hour. We'll come back in a minute. And we're back. Here's our lump of pasta. Let's go ahead and cut this into several slices. There, there, and there. And look at this inner consistency. That is beautiful. That's about what we want. Okay, now you can roll this out by hand and then cut it into whatever shape you want, but there's another way to do it, and that is my pasta roller. So let's get to work with that. So the first thing we are going to do is to run each lump of pasta dough through the roller. And we'll start at a setting of 1. And what this will do is give the pasta a kind of pasta-like cohesiveness. We're going to run it through and then fold it back over itself and then run it through again. And ultimately, we will run this through about 4 times, and then it will be ready to go thinner. Okay, now each time we run it through from here on out, we change the setting, making the rollers come closer together by just a little bit with each setting. We started out at a 1, and we're going to change it to 2 and 3 and 4, all the way up to 5. And at 5, because I want these noodles to be a little hearty, we're going to stop and then change out the roller for a cutter. Now this particular cutter is set to fettuccine, which is about 1/4 inch wide noodles, and so we just feed it in the top, and you can see that it comes out magically as fettuccine noodles, which we will use in the soup. And so once they're all cut, wrap them over my hand and then put them on my homemade pasta rack that you see there. And here we go. Suddenly, it's pasta. And there you have it. Well, here we are. The pasta is drying on the rack, and I will use this later this afternoon to make the chicken noodle soup. You can see it bubbling in the pot behind me. But I never cease to be amazed at the miracle. You start with simple flour, and you end up with something that can draw people into the life of community. That's amazing. Now later on this afternoon or this evening when Kay walks through that door, she'll be greeted by the wonderful smells of this meal that will cause her to feel that she's walking into an environment that is safe and warm and comforting. And that's also a miracle. Now, the food that this will become could be served to people who are eyeing each other across deep divides of theology or politics or ideology. But they can agree on the beauty of good food. And when we sit across the table with the food between us instead of all those other issues, maybe, if we're attentive, we can look into the other's eyes and see a little bit of ourselves. And maybe realize that we're all in this together. And maybe that what joins us together is actually more important than what divides us. You know, maybe Jesus should have called himself the pasta of life. I don't know. But maybe this is more than carbs. Maybe this has the power to close divides and to create community. Now that's something to think about. Well, I think that's enough for today. We'll see you next time. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and give. Why are you doing this? Hey, quit it. Watch the knees. Why are you doing this? I'm a ram. It's what I do. I ram.